Mina Edwards walked along the Brighton shoreline as if the pebbled beach were a second home, her trainers crunching on the stones and the wind tugging at her hair while a battered Nikon camera swung from her shoulder, its strap patched with tape, carried everywhere like a shield between her and the world. At 17, she felt both invisible and exposed. Her mother's tired silences filling their small home after late shifts at the care home and school offering no real belonging. But through her lens she captured what others overlooked. The tiredness in strangers' smiles, the elegance of gulls mid-flight, the loneliness of empty benches after rain. And one morning as the sea looked moody beneath thick clouds, she paused to photograph waves crashing against a half-submerged groin, only to turn and see an elderly man stumble near the promenade caf tables and a young man rush to steady him, her shutter instinctively clicking as Dan Clark, a dark-haired boy with an accent she couldn't place, met her eyes curiously before she turned away with burning cheeks, unaware that single photo would change everything. The boy worked at the caf, stacking chairs and setting menus, and later, after Mina printed the photo in the darkroom and nervously slid it across the counter to him, Dan smiled gently, folding it as though it were fragile, and they began speaking in fragments until she learned he was 18, working while studying English after fleeing Syria 2 years earlier, guarded about his past, but kind. And one morning Mina noticed the same old man Dan had helped, Mr. Hallows, watching them from across the street with a gaze not grateful but sharp, as though weighing every word. A week later, a violent storm left debris scattered along the beach, and Mina, restless, discovered oil-soaked gulls tangled in seaweed and a fresh barrel smeared with oil half buried in the sand, boot prints leading toward it, the markings too recent to be washed away. And when Dan joined her, he muttered this was deliberate, not storm damage. But before they could look closer, Mr. Hallows appeared above them with his cane, warning in a voice that carried over the wind that the tide buried what was meant to stay buried. Unsettled, Mina and Dan later visited Hallows in his weather-beaten cliff house under the pretense of returning a scarf, finding tobacco and salt in the air, faded metals on the walls, and maps curling with age, where the veteran rasped that after the war men had dumped everything in the sea: chemicals, fuel, worse out of sight and out of mind. And when Mina pressed that the barrel was fresh and she had seen footprints, his eyes narrowed as he warned there were men who profited from silence, men who hated cameras. But as they left, Mina noticed a locked chest by the fire and a photo of Hallows as a young soldier beside identical barrels. That night, as she developed her photos, she saw a blurred figure watching near the rocks. Unsettled but determined, she uploaded the images to her small Instagram. And to her surprise, they spread quickly, activists demanding answers from the council, even as an anonymous message landed in her inbox: stop digging, or next time the tide won't spare you. And though her hands trembled when she showed Dan, who paled and guessed smugglers or profiteers were involved, she refused to back down, even after confiding in her friend Jess at school and hearing she should go to the police, where an officer shrugged her off with a dismissive "barrels wash up all the time," leaving Mina chilled. Footsteps shadowed her on the walk home, and a note in her mailbox read "last warning." Yet she would not let fear silence her, and so she and Dan planned to follow the boot prints at night despite Jess's pleading, heading to the moonless, oil-scented shore with a flashlight where, at the cliff base, they found several barrels stacked and hidden beneath tarpaulin. Mina's heart hammering as she photographed everything until a voice cut through the dark: "I warned you," and a man in a council jacket, scarf, masking part of his face, stepped forward with cold eyes and a crowbar glinting in his hand, declaring their photos would die there, and Dan shoved Mina behind him. But just as the man advanced, another light flared, and Mr. Hallows emerged from the rocks, shotgun casually slung, his voice steady as he ordered the attacker to put the weapon down, insisting the true enemies were those paying him. And in that charged instant, Mina's flash exploded, startling the man long enough for Dan to lunge and knock the crowbar aside before he fled into the darkness. By morning, with Mina's photos now public, police were forced to act and barrels were removed. Headlines blaring: illegal waste dumping on Brighton shoreline, teen photographer exposes scandal. Though officials quickly blamed rogue contractors and the masked man vanished without trace, leaving Mina convinced powerful figures had buried the deeper conspiracy. Yet still her defiance had sparked something. Activists rallied, cleanups were organized, petitions circulated, and her photos were exhibited at the town hall where she stood awkwardly beside Dan, Unsure, she deserved the applause, until later on the quiet beach, she asked Hallows why he had helped. And the old veteran, eyes heavy on the horizon, admitted he had once buried too many secrets, mistaking silence for loyalty when it only bred rot, urging her not to waste her gift. And as she raised her camera to capture him against the endless sea, he did not turn away, and she knew the shoreline would always hold shadows. But she was no longer afraid to face them.